Imagine a man so strange that his bizarre habits and controversial actions led to his downfall in the most shocking way. Tiny Tim's obsession with cleanliness, his fixation on adult diapers, and a Christmas song that crossed a line, it all came crashing down in one unforgettable moment, getting him permanently banned from TV. This is the shocking, untold story they never wanted you to hear. Tiny Tim was born Herbert Boutros Khoury on April 12, 1932 in Manhattan, New York City. His father, Boutros Khoury, was a Lebanese textile worker from Beirut and the son of a Maronite Catholic priest. His mother, Tilly Staff, was a Polish Jewish garment worker who had immigrated to the United States from Brest-Litovsk in 1914. Music wasn't just a passion for Tiny Tim, it was his world. While other kids were playing outside, young Herbert was captivated by an old wind-up gramophone and a single 78 RPM record of Beautiful Ohio by Henry Burr. That song would change everything. Living in Washington Heights, surrounded by immigrants chasing new dreams, Herbert's parents worked hard to give him a stable life. But his heart wasn't in ordinary pursuits. By age 5, he was hooked on music. By 6, he was teaching himself guitar. A few years later, the ukulele, thanks to Arthur Godfrey, became his new obsession. While other kids his age followed the latest trends, Herbert spent hours at the New York Public Library, diving into old phonograph records and sheet music from the early 1900s. His fascination with forgotten music grew to the point where he knew more about artists from the past than most historians. School was never his priority. He failed sophomore year multiple times before dropping out to focus on his true passion, music. His parents worried, but Herbert knew what he wanted. Small jobs kept him afloat, but it was his unique voice, an almost haunting falsetto, inspired by singer Rudy Vallee, that would set him apart. At first, Tiny Tim's high falsetto felt strange, but something about it clicked. He later called it a religious experience. It wasn't just a technique, it was his voice, his identity. But Herbert Khoury wasn't a name that would stand out, so he tried a few stage names: Larry Love, Derry Dover, Julian Foxglove, and Sir Timothy Timmins. None of them stuck. Then in 1960, his manager suggested a simple yet ironic name: Tiny Tim. Inspired by the fragile yet hopeful character from A Christmas Carol, it was a strange choice for someone who stood 6 feet 1 inch. But it worked. With the name came a new identity. Tiny Tim grew his hair long, wore bright, eccentric clothes, and powdered his face white, symbolizing purity and youth. He wasn't just a musician anymore, he was a character. Tiny Tim's journey began in the strangest of places: Hubert's Museum and live flea circus in Times Square. Surrounded by sword swallowers, tattooed ladies, and a real flea circus, Tiny Tim fit right in. Performing old Tin Pan Alley songs in his signature falsetto, he quickly earned the nickname Human Canary. But while the freak show atmosphere shaped him, it also made it hard for people to take him seriously as a musician. By 1960, Tiny Tim had outgrown Hubert's and moved to Greenwich Village, where he hustled to find bigger stages. His manager, George King, pushed hard for success, but it didn't come easy. Tiny Tim's early gigs were far from glamorous. He played wherever he could: small clubs, open mics, even the legendary Café Wah, where young Bob Dylan was just starting out. Some nights he played for nothing but food. But everything changed in 1963 when he landed a steady job at Page 3, a lesbian-run club on 7th Avenue. The pay was just $96 a month, but it gave him a real audience, one that embraced his eccentricities. His rendition of I Enjoy Being a Girl became a crowd favorite, and he mastered switching between falsetto and baritone in a single song. At Page 3, he wasn't just a sideshow act anymore. He was a true artist. Despite a growing reputation in Greenwich Village, the mainstream music world didn't know what to make of him. His high-pitched voice and unusual appearance were seen as novelty. But things began to change in February 1968 when he appeared on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. With his ukulele and shopping bag, Tiny Tim walked onto the set, his long curls framing his pale face. Co-host Dick Martin had no idea who he was. Then, he began singing "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" in his signature falsetto. The audience was split. Some laughed, others sat in stunned silence. By the end of the performance, everyone was paying attention. That moment made him an overnight sensation. In a time of radical change, Tiny Tim's oddities fit perfectly with the era's push for individuality. NBC wasn't sure if he'd connect with mainstream audiences, but producer George Schlatter believed in him. Tiny Tim was invited back as a recurring guest, and each appearance made him more famous. Later that year, his success on Livin earned him a recording contract with Reprise Records, owned by Frank Sinatra. In April 1968, Tiny Tim released his debut album, God Bless Tiny Tim, a strange mix of Tin Pan Alley classics, vaudeville tunes, and original tracks, all performed in his signature falsetto. The standout song, "Tiptoe Through the Tulips," shocked everyone by becoming a surprise hit, reaching number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100. Produced by Richard Perry, who later worked with Barbra Streisand and Carly Simon, the album combined lush orchestration with Tiny Tim's quirky style, creating a cinematic, almost theatrical feel. Critics were divided. Some hailed it as a revival of forgotten American music, while others dismissed it as a joke. But the public loved it, and God Bless Tiny Tim sold well. Songs like The Other Side, with surreal lyrics about melting ice caps, showed a deeper, thoughtful side of Tiny Tim. His rendition of "I Got You, Babe," where he sang both parts, switching between baritone and falsetto, proved his vocal range and creativity. By late 1968, Tiny Tim was everywhere. The Ed Sullivan Show, The Jackie Gleason Show, and The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. He became a cultural mystery, a novelty act to some, a serious artist to others. Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol saw his potential, and even legends like Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra respected his knowledge of early American music. But for many, he was just an eccentric performer who had gotten lucky. Despite mixed opinions, Tiny Tim became one of The Tonight Show's most unforgettable guests. He appeared more than 20 times between 1968 and the early 1970s, each appearance making him a bigger sensation. His first performance in 1968, promoting God Bless Tiny Tim, sold over 200,000 copies almost immediately. Tiptoe Through the Tulips became a hit, and his unique mix of eccentricity and talent left viewers fascinated. Carson, caught between amusement and awe, invited him back again and again. But by the mid-1970s, public tastes shifted towards rock and pop. The novelty of Tiny Tim began to wear off, and his appearances on The Tonight Show became less frequent. However, on December 17, 1969, he had his biggest moment. Tiny Tim married 17-year-old Victoria Buttinger, known as Miss Vicky, live on The Tonight Show in a televised event watched by an estimated 45 million viewers. The ceremony, set amid thousands of Dutch tulips, was one of the most watched TV events of the decade, only trailing behind the moon landing in viewership. Even Johnny Carson, during his monologue, made sure the audience knew it was real. As a testament to the wedding's impact, crime rates reportedly dropped that night because so many people stayed home to watch. Tiny Tim's marriage on live TV was his moment of peak fame, but it was also the beginning of the end for his time in the spotlight. Tiny Tim once called himself the hottest talent in the country, but his marriage to Miss Vicky didn't last. After 8 years and 1 child, they divorced, though their televised wedding remained one of the most famous moments in TV history. Johnny Carson had a genuine appreciation for Tiny Tim. Unlike other novelty guests, Tiny Tim was always given space to talk. With his deep knowledge of early 20th century music, he could discuss forgotten artists and obscure songs in detail. Carson respected this passion, letting him share it with the audience while keeping things lighthearted. But Tiny Tim wasn't just a quirky guest. He surprised Carson during one appearance when he casually announced his plans to marry Miss Vicky live on air, leaving Carson momentarily speechless. Carson kept it respectful, ensuring Tiny Tim's eccentricities never turned into ridicule. As the 1970s progressed, Tiny Tim's star began to fade. Public tastes shifted, and the novelty that once made him famous no longer had the same impact. His appearances on The Tonight Show became less frequent, and he struggled to maintain mainstream success. When Reprise Records dropped him, Tiny Tim took matters into his own hands and started Victim Records in 1971, a label he created with his wife's name. Despite releasing 5 singles, the label folded by 1972. Undeterred, Tiny Tim launched another label, Toilet Records, reflecting how he felt about his career at the time, but it too failed. His mainstream career was over, but he kept performing. Tiny Tim played anywhere that would have him: community centers, punk clubs, even circuses. Surprisingly, he found a niche with punk rockers who admired his rebellious spirit. He even collaborated with Brave Combo, a Texas polka band known for their experimental sound. He became an underground cult figure, far from his mainstream heyday. Then came the controversy. In 1985, Tiny Tim released Santa Claus Has Got the AIDS This Year, a song that sparked backlash during the AIDS crisis. Although Tiny Tim later clarified that it referred to an old candy, the damage to his reputation was done. Things got even stranger in 1987 when he starred in Blood Harvest, a low-budget slasher film where he played a disturbing ukulele-playing clown named Marvelous Mervo. The film flopped, but over time it gained a cult following. Tiny Tim's career may have faded from the mainstream, but he remained one of the most bizarre and unforgettable figures in entertainment. Tiny Tim's obsession with cleanliness, bizarre spending habits, and unusual personal life shocked the world. Behind the ukulele and his signature oversized grin, Tiny Tim's habits were as eccentric as his performances. His obsession with hygiene was extreme. He showered up to 6 times a day, claiming he hadn't missed a single one since December 20th, 1989. For him, cleanliness was about purity, and towels? Never. He only used disposable paper towels, convinced they were germ-free. And that wasn't all. He brushed his teeth 4 times a day with a mix of 3 different toothpastes, believing this combination gave him an unmatched shine. His spending habits were equally strange. He spent massive amounts of money on cosmetics, not to look younger, but to surround himself with beauty, sometimes even buying makeup just to feel closer to beautiful women. His personal life was just as bizarre. Tiny Tim's most famous relationship was with Victoria May Buttinger, aka Miss Vicky. The two married on The Tonight Show in front of 45 million viewers in December 1969, making it the second most watched television event of the decade. He was 37, she was only 17. Their marriage quickly fell apart, with Miss Vicky later stating that they wanted completely different things. By their 2nd anniversary, they were already living apart. Tiny Tim's love life wasn't any less eccentric. After Miss Vicky, he married twice more, each relationship marked by his unpredictable behavior and bizarre views on commitment. On his wedding night to Miss Vicky, he told her he still planned to see other women. His 3rd wife, Susan Marie Gardner, known as Miss Sue, stayed with him until his death, despite the strange beginnings and unpredictable nature of their relationship. But no matter how strange his personal life got, Tiny Tim's love for performance never faded. In 1996, at the age of 64, he took the stage at the Uke Expo in Montague, Massachusetts. But during his first song, something went horribly wrong. As he stood before a stunned audience, he collapsed face first onto the stage. The crowd froze in shock, some even crying as paramedics rushed in. The end was near, but Tiny Tim's legacy had already been sealed, an unforgettable, peculiar, and deeply human entertainer. Tiny Tim's final days were as unpredictable as his life. After collapsing on stage at the Uke Expo in September 1996, He was rushed to the hospital and spent 11 days in intensive care. His heart was functioning at only 40%, and doctors warned him to stop performing, even suggesting heart surgery. But Tiny Tim, ever defiant, refused. He didn't want surgery or scars. He wanted to keep the heart he was born with, no matter the cost. 2 months later, on November 30th, he performed at a benefit concert in Minneapolis. From the moment he arrived, it was clear something was wrong. Struggling to make it to the stage, he played a few songs before stopping mid-performance. "I'm not feeling well," he told his wife Susan. But before they could make it off stage, he collapsed. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, he was pronounced dead at 11:20 p.m. from cardiac arrest. His last moments, Susan later said, were peaceful. He didn't feel pain. The last sound he heard was the applause from the audience. Tiny Tim's legacy lived on through his most famous song, "Tiptoe Through the Tulips." Originally written in 1929, the song was a sweet love ballad, performed by Nick Lucas. It was charming and nostalgic, selling millions of copies. But when Tiny Tim covered it in 1968 on Rowan and Martin's Livin, everything changed. His falsetto, paired with a ukulele, turned the once romantic tune into something unexpected, bizarre, then unsettling. By the time Insidious 2010 used it in a horror context, the cheerful melody was forever linked to unease. The once sweet love song had become synonymous with dread, all thanks to Tiny Tim's unique twist. From nostalgia to terror, Tiptoe Through the Tulips remains unpredictable, continuing to appear in media, advertising, and pop culture, shifting effortlessly between humor, memory, and horror. Tiny Tim took an old tune and turned it into something strange, unforgettable, and timeless. Help this video reach more fans. Like and share now, and tap that subscribe button for more videos.